There we go. It is being recorded.
Thank you. Before
No
we
worries.
get too far.
Okay. So not sure why it was being weird, but yay! Thank you everybody for being here. As people show up, they're gonna join. We'll let them in, but otherwise, I figure might as well start. The idea, honestly, the oldest tradition I've ever been told about within the cadets was started 3 or 4 years after they started to exist. And my understanding, it was Gweno's idea, Gweno being Gwyneth's Danya, that it is the cadet's duty to, quote unquote, bedouble one's dawn. And ever since then, it's been sort of the tradition that the cadets try and make sure that the White Scarves walk around with this very changeable look of confusion, pain, suffering, humor, something. And depending on who you were a cadet to and how you did it, this could have been, silly pranks. They could have been mean pranks. Usually 99% of the time, they were not mean pranks. Every one I've ever really heard about came from a place of respect and love. Now, embarrassment was also highly involved, but they were never done as a way to absolutely insult anybody or to be mean to them. Robert used to tell us the story of the best game to play is lets you and me get you in trouble. And if you have cadet brothers, well, then you can come up with great ideas, convince your cadet brothers that they should go do them. And then when your Don comes up and asks, hey, what the hell's going on? You can tell your Don, that looks dangerous. I don't know what they're doing, but you should probably stop them. Does that pretty much cover it, Robert, what you would do with Mouse?
With great regularity. Henri, Joachim, even Laven were all just prime material for throwing under the bus.
Exactly. Robert, do you want to go over the banners first, since that happened first?
So the banners. The background on the banners, we flash back to Penzic 19, and all the White Scarves were up there. And it was Patrick and Julia as crown. And when we did the big opening procession, myself as one of the baby cadets at the time, and somebody remind me, I had her name memorized this morning and I've forgotten it. Blaine's wife.
Fiona?
Yeah. We got handed these two little bitty hang down type banners. And that's what we were leading the procession with. And as we walked along, we both were commenting about how cheesy we felt. Because all the other kingdoms had banners and we had small table coverings. So we got through that war and we got through Penzic 20. And Avery mentioned about pranks and, done with love, but sometimes not always received with love. And we were at Queens and some of the cadets had done various little pins modified to represent each Don, an aspect of each Don's personality or persona. And the Dons themselves didn't really have too big of an issue with this, but some of the Don's significant others were greatly offended for them. And then before the end of the event, we were hearing the comments about, well, the cadets are just here to goof off, fart around, and play pranks, and they don't really care. And that part kind of stung and was not well received by a fair number of us. So a group of us got together, did on the side begging and borrowing to get extra money from people so we could, because everybody that was involved was pretty much a college kid or immediately post-college trying to figure out how to be an adult. And we had we gathered the material for the great big trigger banners that are still floating around in the kingdom somewhere. We had a sewing party at Cadet Zorkon's house. Myself, Zorkon, Ricardo, Laven, and Henri, all sewing. By the way, none of us know how to sew. And Zorkon's wife, Dominique, and Crystal, and Katrina of Coventry trying to coach us and not kill us. There's a picture floating around out there in somebody's photo collection, if you can find it, it's incredible, of Laven putting thread on a bobbin by hand, looking off camera with the comment of, "What do you mean you can do it on the machine?" We didn't know any better. So we got the banners made, acquired the first set of poles, acquired the harnesses for marching with them. And if you ever trot those things out again, people need to go down to a flag store and invest in harnesses to carry them. Otherwise, you can practice being carried away by them.
I will vouch, there's a wonderful picture from the Pennsic when Duncan and Larissa were on the throne of Cadet Alessandro and Cadet Amarinda standing at the top of where the castle is now at Pennsic. And they're both leaning completely into the poles because those trigger monstrosities are absolutely flat because the wind is so strong that, you know, Emerida and Alessandro are literally trying not to be taken to Oz.
So then we come around and we're getting ready for Gulf War Run 1, and it's Patrick and Julia's reign again. I believe it's Gulf War 1, might have been 2. I don't remember that far back. And it got to be for evening court at Queens. We notified the herald, Hossein Ali Komi, hey, we need time in court for a surprise. And His Majesty overheard us. And he's like, wait a minute, I don't like surprises. And he agreed that the cadets could have a brief moment of time in court for their surprise, but it better be good or we were in trouble. And Hossein called us into court when it was our time, and we had kept the banners totally hidden from everybody. And we popped them up into view and marched them in to present to the crown to show that we do care. And to me, the symbol that we won was Patrick Michael crying. And those of you that know Patrick know that doesn't happen easily.
Nope.
He prides himself on his strength. And we broke him. And we took on the additional duty that because the crown travels with so much regalia as it is, crammed in that trailer and people trying to keep up with it, that the cadets would take it upon themselves that those banners would travel as the crown needed. And there used to be a really good Pony Express system of either cadets doing massive handoffs or even using UPS if needed. And that's how we got started with them. And that's how we showed the kingdom we do care. And that's it in a nutshell.
And I would add that since then, you know, the cadets have generally been the ones who've taken care of it. They've moved it and all that. But the tradition is anyone who is a rapier fighter who is not a white scarf is not only allowed but encouraged to hold those banners in court. And let me rephrase that. It is not anyone who's a rapier fighter. It is anyone who is part of the rapier community. Because Mistress Mafanui has held those banners in court. Mafanui doesn't fight, but you can't bloody tell me she's not part of our community. I know Countess Michelle has held them in court before. You know, several others. That is something that is kind of a pride thing, at least it was when I was a cadet, that we make sure they're there, damn it. And my understanding is since then, with technology having advanced quite far since I became a White Scarf 16 years ago, that there's a Facebook page that they, you know, people arrange to do it. and we try and make, you know, and that people do try and make sure that this is continuing. Yay, thank you.
Technology makes that much easier today, but yes, it is still very much a thing that we try to take care of that.
Yeah, because when I first was a cadet, it was definitely the, you know, sometimes you had to make a phone call. When you're at an event, you'd have to plan out the next 4 or 5 events in a row. Who's going to be where? Wait, you're going up here? Okay, I'm going to this one. I can trade you this one 3 weeks down the road, but I'll keep them until then. And then the week after that, you'll make sure, you know, so-and-so in Lubbock gets them, or wherever it is that needs to go.
Prior to the Pony Express, I racked up a lot of miles.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't get a chance to use them much, but the fact that there are now regional banners is also extremely helpful.
Yep. Yeah. I will say that the second set, because the Trigger ones were great, but they were Trigger, and by the time they did the Mark II, they were what, 15, 20 years old at that point?
They still trot them out on occasion. They're
every now and then they'll sing them out. But I mean, when Rick's did the silk, that first set of silk ones, that was after I was a White Scarf. That was a good 10, 11 years ago. So that means that the Trigger ones at that time were still 20 years old. And I know we've done 2 or 3 sets of the silk ones now, because like you said, there's regional ones that are around. And oh, the silk ones are so much easier to deal with.
I almost feel like the cadets are spoiled.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, we do. But they're not having to hold them uphill in the snow 5 miles both ways. So
exactly.
The next thing that the cadets started doing, it actually started when before I was a cadet, that first 3 or 4, about first 3 years I was a Rapier fighter, which was the Dons protected the Queens, and the Centurions were following the Prince around, and the cadets started following the Princess around and helping guard them. It wasn't oh, this is what you do, but it was, hey, there's several of us, we're trying to keep it up, and people generally decided we thought it was a good idea. And so we started doing it on a fairly regular basis.
It was pretty much something we did.
Yeah. And so Octavia becomes princess. This is 1999, the 20th anniversary of Ansteorran being a kingdom. And she's going to be the 20th anniversary queen. So the 3 months while she's princess, you know, various people are following her around and all this. And the first thing that she did, that Octavia was the first one to do, that has become standard, was Octavia looked at the community and said, hey, I'm going to be queen. All these people are following around and liking me. I don't know them. And she proposed the very first Princess's Tea. Unfortunately, that Princess's Tea was supposed to be held at Steppes Warlord. That at one point during that event, Gwyneth was, okay, anybody who's been to Steppes Warlord knows the big field out there with a light pole in the middle of it, that big open field. Yeah, Gwyneth was more than knee deep in water walking through the middle of it, because that's how much rain there was.
So that was the year of Waterlord then.
One of them.
One of the years of Waterlord.
Yeah, so basically the event ended up not happening, and so, you know, that was, since that was supposed to be when and Sarah was queen, and she was going to come by as well, and we were all supposed to have this great get together, and it never happened. So the very first Princess's Tea actually happened about 4 weeks after, month and a half after Octavia became queen, at Steppes Artisan in the middle of August. That was actually the event. We did the cadet meeting, the Princess's Tea, the White Scarves had a meeting, and that evening in court they announced they were making Kaylee a White Scarf. But so that was Octavia's fault. And pretty much since then, the cadets have been really consistent about just about every single princess. At some point during the time before she becomes queen, they set up a day, and it's a party. They get together, they have fun, and no white scarves allowed, and it's a really good way for the queens to start to know the rapier community, especially for those who've never dealt with the rapier community before. I think it's been really cool, in addition, that the cadets have absolutely latched on to the fact that they are the princess's group, and they follow her around. I know that Duchess Margaret had an absolutely amazing time. She tells stories about going out shopping at Gulf Wars with her cadre of cadets. It was like, 15 or 20 of you who took her around the entire time. Duchess Sonia, the first time she was princess at Gulf Wars, and when she was on the armored field, and she had what she called her wrecking crew, that they all went out on the heavy field and had a blast together. Multiple, I know Margarita, first time she was queen, or first time she was princess, she really didn't know the rapier community that well at all. And by the time it was time for her to be queen, she felt comfortable because the cadets had done such a great job. And more power to you guys. Thank you for doing this. The last thing that happened because of Octavia, so we're at an event. It wasn't Warlord. I want to say it was at that site, though. It was out at Canton. It was like an LC event that was held out there. And I can't remember if Pete was the cadet guarding her and I was walking up to relieve him, or vice versa. But it was Pete and I were the ones involved. And
could it have been Three Kings?
What?
Could it have been Three Kings?
Possibly.
Three Kings was held out there too.
Yeah, that might have been it. As one of us walks up, and we're standing there, and we're going to trade places and guard her, Octavia looks over, and David, her husband's sitting right next to her, and behind him, there's a centurion, and the centurions at the time had a spear. And the spear had, really gorgeous tooled leather cover and everything without black stars and the whole 9 yards on it. And every time a centurion would guard the prince, they had this spear that they would hold. And Octavia looked at me and Pete and went, "He's got a spear. I don't have a weapon. Why don't I have a weapon? I should have a weapon." And Pete and I kind of looked at each other and went, "Yes, you should." And so as soon as we both got done, we gathered people together. There were mainly 6 of us involved. We kind of, beat the bushes and threatened and cajoled all the other cadets to give us money so we could do it. But mainly it was myself, Pete, Mistress Ari, who is now living in Aytonveld, who was Dore's cadet at the time, ended up being Robert's cadet. Ari, Kaylee, Hawkins, and Yoshi was the last one. Yoshi actually made the original Princess's Blade. And the time between that event and when we gave it to her, which was at Warlord, the day, because the Princess's Tea was supposed to be like, I think Sunday morning, and Saturday was okay, but we gave it to her Saturday in court, and that was about 3-4 weeks maybe. And the fact that Yoshi turned that blade around in that time was amazing. Unfortunately, I haven't seen Yoshi in 15 years. He was out of, I want to say either Namron or Wiesenfeuer, but he unfortunately doesn't play anymore. But, basically the same thing Robert did. We told the Royal Herald, hey, we have a presentation. And we made sure we checked with Gunther and Sarah, who were the crown at the time, and said we would like to do this. And they thought it was a fabulous idea. And they said, Harold, call them in. So we all came in. And for those of you who know Countess Octavia, as Robert said about Patrick Michael, strength is one of the things she prides herself on. I have successfully been involved in situations where we've made Octavia cry twice. And I haven't been killed for either one of them. So I made her cry in a good way. So this is a good thing. But this was the first one. She said, "What are you doing?" And I think Countess Kaylee was the one who said it, was our spokesperson. And she said, "You told us you wanted a weapon. So we got you one. And the tradition was established, and this is by what her excellency told us when she was princess. The cadets made this. This is the cadets. I want only cadets to hold this blade. There's been discussion over the years, that's the nicest way I can phrase it, as to who is theoretically allowed to hold the blade with princess. To put it bluntly, whoever the princess decides she wants to let hold the blade. Technically, it's her blade. She's allowed to do it. The tradition is it is only cadets. While the banners are, we encourage anybody who's a part of the Rapier community and all that to please do that. But this was a task given specifically to the cadets, and therefore we try and maintain that that's who is the ones who continue to hold it with her. That blade lasted until, I want to say 15 years. So I think it was 2015, 2014, 2015, something like that. No, 2016. It was 2016.
Yeah, it's very recent.
Yeah, and again, several of the cadets got together because the blade was showing its age. You know, it was gold plated, or sorry, gold enameled rather than gold plated. So it was starting to chip off. It had been repaired once, but it got to the point where in order to get everything fixed, it was going to cost more than a new blade was going to run anyways. And they commissioned a new blade. And they came to, because Pete and I were the only ones still in Kingdom who were part of that original group that had commissioned the blade. They came to me and Pete and said, we want to do this. Are you guys okay with this? We don't want to step, you know, you did this. We don't want to step on your toes, which was really cool of them. Thank you. And Pete immediately said, I want the sword. And I kind of smacked him and said, no, because if that's the case, you and I are going to fight about it and I'll shoot you at range. And he's like, I'm tall, you're still in range. So before that got worse, I said, why don't we give this to who it really belongs to? And I suggested we give it to Octavia. And Pete immediately went, yeah, you're right. So at the Crown Tournament, when Torrin and Crepin were king and queen, and I think it was Gabriel and Sonia's first time that they won, apparently there was a miscommunication. Because someone apparently, somehow, Octavia found out that there was a new blade coming. And somehow she got the idea in her head that we were going to throw the blade away. And at first, she absolutely refused to come into court. I mean, even before Pete and I got called in, she was outside. She's like, no, I don't even want to deal with it. I don't want to be there. This is wrong. And Davith and I think Michelle and maybe Adelaide, I'm not sure, basically browbeat her and Maggie and made her come into court. Literally, Davith was dragging her by her arm. And the cadets came up to do their presentation with New Blade and said, but we have to do something with the old blade first. They called me and Pete in, and Pete and I agreed that I'm the talker. So he got to hold the blade and I got to talk about it. And when Octavia come up, I told her, you know, you did this. This blade exists, and in fact, the new blade exists because of what you asked for us to do. And this blade is being retired as the princess's blade. So it needs to go back to the person who wanted it in the first place. And at that point, Pete and I both dropped to a knee and said, Your Excellency, this is yours. And this was the second time I made Octavia cry, and I did not get killed for it. So to this day, she periodically walks up and smacks me in the back of the head for it. But
the good thing since you just gave her a blade. So.
Yeah, well, you know, it's Octavia. She can shoot me anytime she wants.
That's true. That's true.
If she can see me, she can hit me. So, you know, but that blade was retired, and Octavia periodically brings it out. She'll bring it to Queens every now and then. She'll bring it to Crown Tournament every now and then. She brought it to 40th year, if I remember correctly. But again, the new blade, The cadets have done a really good job with it. They make sure it tracks. If I remember correctly, I think the Facebook page where you guys track all of that is called Blades and Banners.
It used to be.
Used to be? Okay. Cool.
Like on the Ansteorran Cadets page actually is usually where we keep up with these days, where we keep up with that. This particular reign, the princess chose to keep the blade with herself. Yep. For the entire reign. So it traveled with her and with her entourage by her decision. And then the banners, of course, we do keep up with, like, who has them and who's bringing them to various events and that sort of thing, where we communicate about that sort of thing.
Cool. I'm thrilled that you guys are still doing it.
That's also our main area for planning shenanigans.
I mean, yeah, but we can't tell him about things like that. He's a king. He's the seneschal.
Okay. You may have noticed that there's a sort of a tradition in my line. Okay, to put it bluntly, I'm a pelican because of a cadet prank.
Okay, that's a story I want to hear.
We were at Penzik. I had a new set of armor Gwyneth had made me. It was a burgundy coat, and it was supposed to be worn with a belt. I had a black velvet sash that I used. We get to Penzik, sash is gone. To this day, I have never found that stupid sash. It just totally disappeared.
I blame the cats.
Yeah, I do too. I think they ate it. But, so I'm trying to figure out something to wear, and we had the Elizabethan-style officer sashes. You know, the basically giant sash baldricks that we had made when Robert was the general of the army and I was his lieutenant general. I was basically, there used to be a war point at Gulf Wars that was no white scarves. And I was the general for the cadet army. So I had this sash. Well, shockingly enough, since this was for Ansteorran generals, the sashes were Ansteorran gold, otherwise known as yellow, which happened to be the same color as the sleeves on my new armor, the same fabric, because Gwyneth made the sashes too. It matched. So I put it on. And for the next 3 days, every time I'd go out on the field or whatever and wear my armor, somebody would walk up to me and go, "Oh, you're a protege. Whose are you?" And I would explain that yellow belts are not protected. Anybody can wear them. It matches my outfit. That's why I'm wearing it. And about Wednesday, I got tired of explaining, and somebody said, "Whose protege are you?" And I said, "Robert's." And 2 days later, he found out about it. And what, like 3 years later, we were at Penzik, and Robert had just taken Dominica as a cadet in Ansteorran, in the Ansteorran camp. And we're all, yay, new cadet and all that. And he suddenly turns to me, pulls out a yellow leather belt, and looks at me and says, "Okay, Sparky, put up or shut up."
And you only had one choice at that point.
Well, of course. You know, if you're going to do the joke, you might as well go all the way to the end of it.
Yeah. It's like,
although at that point, I looked at the belt, and it was a really nice one from Chivalry Bookshelf.
Yeah.
And you had all the period fittings and everything on it. And the end of it, it has the brass tail on the end of it. And I look at it and I was like, "Oh, cool," because it has a big R on it in the brass. And I go, "Oh, cool, it's got an R." And Robert looks at me and goes, It does."
Yep.
Because he'd never looked at it. But, you know, hey.
My whole goal when I went looking for that belt was to simply find something that was not sun-kissed yellow.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, so beware of cadet pranks. They backfire on you. I'm Kingdom Seneschal now, and partly I blame Robert. It's his fault.
Wah.
Yeah. That's what I've got. Kaz, you weren't really a cadet, you know, but you certainly had a cadet who had a sense of humor at one point. And
I got a question for you, Avery.
What?
I have a question for you, having been gone for a long time.
Sure.
How many different editions of the White Scarf trading cards came out over the years?
There was one set that happened about want to say 12 years ago, but they weren't really, I mean, they were like this big maybe.
Those were the blue ones, right?
Yeah, I think so. But there hasn't been a real, I mean, I think the last set was a true set, only went up through like maybe Shea.
Because I know
or
Gaspard,
Gray.
Gaspard did the first 2 sets, and then one of Robin's cadets did the 3rd set. That's the
Yeah.
last one I heard about.
And pretty much there haven't been a, for those of you who don't know, there used to be, they had Dawn trading cards, and it had your picture on the front and said what number you were and who made you, how many queens you won, and on the back it had your stats. And it was like speed and strength and political acumen and deviousness and
Yours has
everything.
changed over the years for a lot.
Well, the other part of it also was the top score on all of them was Tyvar. And
If anybody wants to see a set, I have one.
Yep.
I have seen a number of the Pokemon cards recently, not necessarily printed out, but I know there was a collection of those being made about a year ago or so, I think.
I'd love to see them. I think that'd be great.
So I know I've seen some Magic the Gathering as well.
Sorry.
That's what they were. They were Magic the Gathering cards, not Pokemon cards. My apologies.
That's it. Yeah, I know. I've seen my Magic card, which is interesting.
Several years ago at Gulf Wars, I was trying to encourage our North Shield cadets to behave more like Ansteorran cadets. And I brought my deck of cards to show Felix and some of the others. And while I was there, I didn't realize that Simon was showing up because I had never seen Simon in my life because he had stopped playing when I played.
Oh, cool.
So I was able to surprise him at Oila's birthday party and ask him to sign his Don card for me.
Cool. Yeah, I think it'd be great if somebody wanted to do those. And again, the other thing that was on those cards was every Don got a quote, whether you wanted it or not. And we've had some people have gotten their Don. We have known some people who have gotten their Don quotes long before they ever became White Scarves. Like, oh yeah, we're gonna remember that one. And we had the idea of whoever, back when I was still a cadet, if we ever did another set, was that you would get a second quote. There would be one quote by you and one quote about you. And those could be amusing. But yeah, if people wanted to run with it, more power to them. If, what questions do people, like I said, Kaz, from coming in, I was asking you because you were, you came in from a Drachenwald, which didn't have cadets or anything, and suddenly there's these cadets. Did it just freak you out? Did you just sort of roll your eyes? I'm curious how.
Oh no, some friends of ours who had gone to Pinzik and met Yolo had come back with the Academy of the Rapier proceedings from the 4th Academy of the Rapier, and we must have photocopied that thing, sorry, no copyright, but dozens and dozens of times. That sort of became the Bible. So I arrived like fully already in love with the situation. I actually re-enlisted in the Army to come to Ansteorran just so I could be a part of it.
And Nicolo, you said that up in North Shield, I mean, they've closed their order of the White Scarf. I know they did that, but they've got, you still have teachers and students and.
Yeah, we're kind of in flux right now. There are a few cadets. We don't have that many active White Scarves who are not mods at this point. There are a number who are still wear their red scarves, especially those who were jacks. So if they when we first opened the Vitruvia, which is our new grant level award, all of the 3 premiers kept wearing their red scarves for the time being. One of them gave it back later, who was one of mine with I've gotten to the point, we both agreed that he'd gotten to the point that he would have been a White Scarf if we still had it. And eventually he got a mod. But the others have kept wearing their red scarves as part of their tradition. And part of it is, for those who didn't know Jack, one of our big leading people in our Rapier community passed away a year before the mod came out. So all of his former students keep wearing their red scarves.
For
Until
those who don't know, Don Jacques was Mateo's Don, as in Mateo here in Ansteorran. And so some of us do have a connection to Jacques through Mateo. He was a really good guy, and I'm glad that his students are continuing his tradition.
Yeah, if you've seen Mateo's third album, it's got Jack's arms, and I think it's Jack on the cover, Jack's silhouette on the cover, if I remember correctly.
Coolness.
But the only, other than that, the main active one I know is Jean Robert's. So I don't know if they're going to be switching, if she's going to be switching over to being a provost after whenever we have the ceremony, given the way things are, that was supposed to happen at Gulf.
Yeah, Gulf, the coronavirus has screwed up a lot of things, damn it.
Yeah.
I was going to say, Cyrus, you're an Ethelmar, correct? Sorry to bug you and call you out.
Yes, sir.
What is there a tradition with cadets for you guys?
Yeah, Ethelmark's actually a pretty strong cadet kingdom. We slightly turned it on its head that we use blue instead of red, which is something that we kind of borrowed from being a subsidiary of the East Kingdom. But yeah, probably 90% of our Rapier fighters that come through that continue on and make it to the Grant or the Mod have been cadets.
How do they, I mean, you guys had and then have again Diego. So obviously there was some encouragement as far as
I'm not apologizing for that anymore.
What?
I'm not apologizing for that anymore.
Still your fault. And remember, officially when he got his white scarf, he was Mouse's, not yours. So you have deniability. So, but yeah, do the cadets are there specific things that the cadets do as a tradition? I mean, yeah, they're students, and that's usually the path, but are there things that are the cadets do this kind of stuff?
There were things that we tried to make a general tradition in the cadets. They do have a group, they do talk, but it's very fractional. We actually, honestly, wholly on our own, thought of the same kind of Princess Guard in our kingdom when I was still a cadet, and we tried to make it happen. And it ended up just being, we met resistance from some of the others for reasons that weren't very good. But ultimately, what we all decided, the ones of us that pushed really hard and tried to be good, what we ultimately decided is if we wanted something to happen, we had to do it on our own. You know, we couldn't get a consensus of the cadets.
If it makes you feel any better, that's the only way anything's ever been done in Ansteorran as well.
Yeah, it's pretty reflective of our kingdom in the first place. So,
yeah, we make the statement of the cadets do X or the White Scarves do this or the Knights or the Laurels or whatever. But the fact is, 90% of the time, as far as I'm concerned, it's because one or two people decide, hey, screw it, I want to do this, and either they go do it or that one or two people beat the crap out of everybody else in the group and make them go along with it. And it may be that they do it so they go along willingly, or it may be they just force it, but generally it's a core small group that's doing it, and everybody else gets sort of blamed.
Hey Avery, Etienne here.
Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yep. What's up?
So let me tell one real quick, if you don't mind.
Please
because
do.
This actually predates the banners as a cadet project, and it goes back to when Ansteorran was hosting 25th year celebration. And Gwyneth certainly knows this story because she was a huge part of this. About 6 months ahead of 25th year, Julia was queen at the time, and she asked the cadets to meet with her Sunday morning at an event, which was kind of weird. And she said, okay, we've got this thing coming. Ansteorran is hosting it, and I want the rest of the known world to see what Ansteorran Rapier is, and you guys are part of the community, so you guys come up with something to do. And this turned into a brunch that the cadets hosted. We raised funds, hosted it, cooked it for the queens of the known world and the princesses of the known world. And there was some royalties from some very anti-rapier kingdoms in that pavilion at the time who we'd like to think we changed some opinions on by the end of the day. It was one of the early cadet projects before we had some other things. So that's my story.
Yeah, that would be 89, 90?
Let's say this would be 90, 91.
91, okay.
91, yeah. 25th year celebration that was held in Burnett.
Yep. Mm-hmm. So yeah, 1991.
And we actually had, I remember at one point, Rowan was queen, of course. Mm-hmm. And Rowan was talking to Princess of, or the queen, I think of Atlantia, who had horrible allergies and loved salsa, as it turned out. And Rowan kind of put me on the spot and said, I was talking to Her Majesty, and she says she has fencers and she doesn't know what to do with them, and they don't, they're kind of swashbucklers and pirates, and what can she do to fix that? And I think I mumbled something along the lines of, well, Your Majesty, give them something to do, give them attention, but make them responsible for it. So who knows? I don't know whether that helped or not.
My understanding is it did, because that's what led.
Oh dear.
No, that's what helped lead with Jeff Gamble and Gerlach and the those that started Rapier in Atlantia. Because they became, they were mostly trained bands, and they became the Queen's Spears. Because the Queen said, I'm going to do this, I want some help, and the fighters came up and helped. Kaz, Giacomo, part of it also, one of the originals. Since I know you might be a little acquainted with Jimmy. But yeah, do people have questions? I mean, this, like I said, I got asked to tell the story about the blade, and otherwise it's me babbling, and we can keep doing that. But if you have anything you really want to learn about, ask me.
So
if I don't know the answer, I'll fake it.
Avery, did you talk about quarters?
No, I have not mentioned quarters. There has become a tradition.
Quarters started as nickels.
Right, and because that was long before I was a cadet when that started. So basically, okay, so my understanding, was it Queens that did it first, or was it anybody who did it first?
The Queen's trumps.
Well, the Queen trumps everybody else, obviously. But my understanding was originally it was only an option if the Queen offered you a nickel or a dime or a quarter or whatever to get you to do something. Okay, so Robert, like I said, you were there before I was.
So earlier when we were discussing the giving your cadet brothers stupid ideas to get them in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
So Mouse's eventual solution for this was to simply hand me pocket change to set them on fire. It got to the point Henri would just see me coming and would just stop, roll up his sleeves, and hand me his own Zippo to get it over with. We learned you did not set Joachim on fire because he is a Yeti, and it never truly goes out. He will smolder.
To say Joachim is fuzzy is one of the great understatements of the universe.
He smolders for a long time, and then the whole place stinks. And eventually, some of the royalty saw this going on and decided they wanted in on it. Probably the ultimate coin stunt actually didn't involve any cadets. Danya Cayley gave a group of squires $1.50, not each, total.
There were like, what, 15 of them?
Yeah, to dogpile His Grace Stephen of Bellatrix at Gothic War in the middle of the list field, and Stephen didn't know it was coming. One squire did not participate. Stephen Squire, eventually Sir Guy, who went into Uber Squire mode and started picking squires up and launching them across the field. And then Kaylee had to rein him in. But that was probably the best pocket change trick I've seen in a long time.
So what it becomes in the intervening years is that if you want to get a cadet to do something that may be quasi a good idea or not, the way to make it happen is you offer them a quarter. And this is actually to the point now where other kingdoms know about this. I've been at Penzic and had queens from other kingdoms, sorry, my camera's being weird, queens from other kingdoms walk up to an Ansteorran cadet and go, so, I hear if I offer you a quarter, I can blah, 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 blah. And I don't think I've ever heard an Ansteorran cadet tell one of them no. You know, this can lead to, again, all of the pranks that happen, all of the jokes, all of the silliness is all done in fun and because we actually do love each other. I give my cadet one hell of a hard time. Orazio gives it right back. But at the end of the day, I know damn well if I say, Orazio, I need X, it'll happen. If he says he needs something, it'll happen. When I was a cadet, even if Aubrey wasn't there, you know, Robert was my stepdon. And if Robert said, Avery, I'll explain later, but you need to go do X. Okay, I'll go do X. And then I'll come back and go, okay, boss, why? You know, share, why did we do this? But the initial trust is there. The initial caring is there. The initial love between, you know, the teachers and the students are there from the beginning. And if you don't have that, then none of this works. And
the phrase, sorry.
Yeah.
I was going to say the phrase, where are we taking me, has been exchanged between me and my Don on more than one occasion. Yep.
And that's not a bad thing. But the fact is that, you know, if I'm at Gulf Wars and this has happened more than once, and Robert suddenly walks up and he's doing a drive-by and suddenly he's grabbed my elbow and, you know, Cadet Avery is being drug off by Don Robert.
We're still going.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, so we're going over here now, boss? Yes, okay, we'll figure it out. You know, but, you know, it's done from the point of view of because we both, you know, you trust each other. Now, this also means that, you know, I do things like, and I'm more than happy to help with his cadet Rix when she comes up with the wonderful idea that her Don is going to be fighting on the heavy field and he's a squire and he needs a new shield. And Rix, being an artist, offered to her squire, Don, that she would paint his new shield for him. So she's giving a gift to her Don. She needs a herald.
I've noticed that a cadet is always a cadet, no matter if it's severed, if people have gone away. It's still there.
So I called a bunch of people together at a Steps 12th night and made sure the crown was there, and we announced Robert's, you know, this gift that was being given to Robert, and she pulled out the shield, and it has his arms on it. It's beautifully painted, and it has Latin around the edges. And the queen asked, well, what does the Latin say? And
Mind you, Robert is very confused because Robert doesn't have a weird border around his device.
So I got to inform Her Majesty that, of course, his cadet, being the helpful cadet that she was, had given him a motto for his shield that said, "Hit me harder, my cadets are watching."
Okay then.
Her fighter practices got a little rough after that.
Yeah, but so did yours. So, you know, hey. You know, and we do things like that. You know, with Aubrey, to be blunt, I've done more pranks on Aubrey after I got my white scarf than I ever did when I was his cadet. I still think the long-term best prank I've ever pulled on Aubrey is I helped make sure he got together with Gia. And I'm not sure if that was a cadet prank on Aubrey or a cadet prank on Gia, but...
I remember when Gaspard got his white scarf, he was upset because he still had 3 pranks set up in line to do.
Yep.
And he had to cut them all short and or had him off to Daffy.
Although he did do the one that apparently was, you know, he did it, what was it, like a month or 2 after he got his white scarf, but he's like, screw it, I've been planning this for too long, which was at Ansteorran 25th year, and the stickers of property of Anastan Tyvar's used equipment room company that not only ended up on things like the thrones, but also apparently ended up on the inside of at least one of the Ansteorran crowns.
Didn't it end up on the Sword of State and they found out when they pulled it out tonight, someone?
Possibly. And, oh, by the way, Tyvar, just so you know, Shamano took the last one to the space station.
We know.
Yeah, so somewhere on the ISS, there's a sticker that says property of Anastan Tyvar's used equipment.
We got back to him. I put one on his telescope.
Perfect. You know, so cadet pranks, they can be great. They can be...
This academy, I got a quarter for to do the virtual academy.
We had a nice thing a couple of years ago that we were looking to do, but because of the way court was rearranged under the BFT, being up against the Ansteorran gates rather than in the BFT, we actually had to cancel it. It was actually shot down by their majesties. But we had made a deal with the Trimerian king to bring in our princess at the time in on the Trimerian warboat through the gates of the Ansteorran gates and escort her up to her throne. But unfortunately, because of the way everything was rearranged, we had to drop it. So.
Yeah. There may have been a poem that was a filk that was written by a certain Ansteorran white scarf, who I happen to sleep next to, that was specifically going after commentary on non-Ansteorran rapier fighters. And if you actually knew what was going on, you could actually identify specifically 7 different ones in the filk. The song it was based on was I Have a Little List from Madame Butterfly by Gilbert and Sullivan. That filk, the copies of that filk may have been hammered onto the gates of Trimaris, onto the main battlefield castle, onto the Rapier pavilion, and a few other places. And myself, Ari, and Alessandro weren't there and have no idea how those pieces of paper got put up. But things happen. For those of you who are not White Scarves, who are cadets, who are wanting to be or whatever, have fun, Mafanwe. But at the end of the day, everybody's definition of what it means, why you're a cadet, what it means to be a cadet, what the traditions are to be a cadet, it boils down to there's one. That's it. Everything else is what you choose to do. The one thing is that somebody has said they're going to be a teacher and somebody said they're going to be a student, and they agree to work with each other. Everything else is window dressing. You find somebody that you are able to work with, you make the agreement that you're going to learn from them, they make the agreement they're going to help you teach. And the fact is, they also make the agreement they're going to learn from you because, oh dear God, does this go both ways as far as that's concerned. The rest of it is how much do you want to participate in what's going on with the rest of the kingdom, with the rest of the community. To me, I think it's worth it. I think it's a great thing. I think, you know, the cadets working together, the cadets doing things, the interplay between, you know, the cadets and their various teachers and crowns and, you know, heirs and whatever is part of what makes this game so much fun. If all it is learning how to hit someone with a sword, I can go to a modern fencing club and do that. And have a great night, man. Thanks for joining us. But the and I think it's worth it. If you have questions and you're not sure about stuff, please, you know, when we're able to be at events, all of you are always welcome to come and bug me and ask questions. You know, ask anybody who knows me. I'm more than willing to talk to you about it and tell you stories. And you may have to smack me and tell me to shut up, but
yeah, the thing is getting Avery to stop talking.
But you know, there's, you know, I have my stories. The fact is, Cornelius is going to have very different stories. You know, he most of his experience has been in a place that's 6 hours away from where I am. And the interactions between him and Orlando are not the same as the interactions between myself and Aubrey. And good, you know, that's not a bad thing. So yeah, I happen to talk a lot, but you know, ask me, ask Steven, ask Robert if you're at Gulf Wars and you run into him. You know, if you're at Gulf Wars, you run into Nicolo. He was an Ansteorran cadet, but he's also been a cadet in another community.
Interrupt right here.
What?
Daniel, I want to interrupt for just a second.
Yeah.
Daniel,
Yes.
as a relatively new cadet, are any of the things that have been said new to you or something you hadn't heard?
The only one that I didn't know about was the story that Etienne told about the brunch. I had not heard that story before, but I do want to say, you know, it's interesting. Some of my earliest experiences getting involved in the Rapier community was like in the broader community, beyond just showing up to fighter practice, thinking I was getting to be kind of good at this, and then going to tournaments, and then finding out, yeah, that's you have a long way to go. Getting involved beyond that experience was two things. The first one was actually being encouraged, actually by you, Rixon, to show to go up and hold the cadet banners, well, the Rapier banners the first time in court. You were a cadet at the time and encouraged me to do that. And then you actually stepped in to save me because Modius was going to just walked. I had no idea who he was. I didn't know anything about the banners, didn't know anything about the traditions. And Modius was just going to walk up and take the banner from me, as you know, as he was wanting to do at times. And Rixon stepped in and was like, no, and then pointed out there was a picture of him on the banner pole. Do not give this to this man, which I thought was particularly apt because, you know, I later learned that this was part of it. After that, the next significant event to me joining the Rapier community was my first story time with you, Avery. Yeah, you're like, what? We were at an event. We were all going to an event. We were all staying at Orlando's house. It was you and Gwyneth and me and Aurelia, who was a cadet at the time. We're all staying at Orlando's house. And you started telling stories about some of the history and some of the early parts of Ansteorran. And it was either that night when we were just sitting around Orlando's living room. And then later, like, it was at a different event, and you basically were holding kind of a story time circle, and we had all basically gathered around to listen to you. So I will say that, you know, the traditions that have been enumerated here and people have talked about are all ones that I'm familiar with, but the reason I'm familiar with them is because the storytellers have taken the time to educate me and tell me, like, hey, these are the things that you need to know. These are our traditions. Remember them, pass them on, and practice them. And I'm really glad for that, because one of the things that was really, one of the things that made me want to be a cadet was the ability to participate in those traditions. Like I wanted nothing more than to be able to go up there and hold the, take a turn on the princess sword and being a part of holding the banners. And actually this last for her highness currently, Marguerite, her most recent princess tea, being involved in that was one of the coolest things I've gotten to do. And of course, it's kind of an interesting story. There was no tea served at this princess tea.
There rarely is.
There was no tea. And so for people that were there, there were a number of interesting beverages, but as far as I know, no tea was served. There was one white scarf there, at least in spirit. We had a picture of Don Orlando, and I'm not saying that, like, I'm not going to say out loud or admit that we played pin the tail on the white scarf, but
it happens.
Hey, like it may have happened.
At least it was a picture.
Yeah, well, like that. That's because he skipped the event. I'm reasonably certain the original plan was to have Orlando there and do that. Like I'm not 100% sure, but I'm fairly sure that was the original plan. But he wasn't. He was not able to make it to that event, so we used a picture. I think that there was a plan involving a large number of balloons, and because those balloons later got used for a different game that we played. So the traditions that have grown up around it are very interesting, and one of my favorite things, one of the questions I asked at the Princess Tea, though, and this was kind of one thing that was shocking to me, is I was the only cadet there who had taken the red scarf after the white scarf was non-armigerous. I was the only cadet at that Princess Tea who had taken the red scarf after the white scarf was made non-armigerous. So it is kind of interesting. I feel like our community is kind of smaller than you guys' was. Like, in some ways we're pretty tight-knit, but in other ways there's just not as many of us, and we're pretty spread out. I know, Razio, Avery, your cadet, and there's 2 or 3 others up here in the north, but other than that, I mean, we don't see that. We don't see a lot of activity on the actual Ansteorran Cadets page beyond the essential, like, hey, who's going to this event? I feel like in some ways, I feel like there needs to be more of us. Like we need to.
There's a simple solution for that.
Yeah.
Drag more people to practice.
Yeah,
there's only so many. There's only.
Yeah.
It's both a danger and a curse. So we need more people. We always need more people. We've always needed more people. But they also need to be brought into our community in such a way that they don't necessarily leap at the first offer made to them, because that may not be the best offer. And they need to understand that it's okay to say no. That saying no is not a stigma. Looking back on it, Mouse was not my original at the top of my hit chart for who was going to be my Don. Looking back on it, the person that was originally my first choice, we would have been a train wreck. My first choice was Dupre.
That would not have gone well together.
But I just thought he was the coolest thing on the field.
Yes, but no.
Yeah,
oh, no.
Me and
This is
Dupre
not
would,
an uncommon phenomenon.
but we would not have been a good. In retrospect, it's like, oh, that would have been a train wreck. When Mouse asked me, I was actually petitioning Mouse to offer a scarf to Ricardo. And Mouse was like, we're going to change the subject for a minute. We'll get back to that. And that's when he made me the offer. And it's like, I wasn't prepared for that.
Yeah, my first choice would have been Haroon, so, and that would have been a train wreck too, I think.
Yeah, it
My
probably
first
would have.
choice was Oilo. That would have been
Ooh.
bad.
Yeah, no.
And to be blunt, the only reason I agreed to become Aubrey's cadet is because he trapped me in my own damn argument and made me agree to do it.
You verbally argued with Aubrey?
It was like 1:30 in the morning at Pennsic, sitting in YOLO's shop, me, Aubrey, and Gwyneth, and he made me admit that maybe being a cadet wasn't a horrible thing, and perhaps you could actually accomplish more being part of the system than just standing outside of it and yelling at it.
I'm going to throw something in the links here. Ages ago, Simon Morcar wrote a paper on questions for a prospective cadet or ward back when North Shield was still part of Mid-Realm. Among the things is this really the person you want to train under? What if the other person you prefer is getting close, and are you going to regret not having waited? But it was a really good set of questions to ask, which of course I only found out about 3 years after I was already his cadet. But
well,
of course.
It's interesting. The first person that I asked about potentially forming such a relationship with was Aubrey, or not Aubrey, it was Avery. I got you guys confused in my head because my brain wouldn't say. Well, it was actually you, Avery, and you told me no, which was exactly the correct answer. Like you 100%. Like it was 100% the correct thing to do. Like for a variety of reasons at the time. But you also gave me some really good advice, which was like, these are some things, you basically gave me some, hey, these are some things you need to look at when exploring something like this. And these are the reasons, like, you didn't just say no, you said, these are the reasons why, like, I this would not be a good thing right now. And I'm kind of glad that you did that, because if you hadn't, I don't know that I would have made it as far as I have in some ways, because that made me rethink, like, well, that was one of the things that made me rethink, okay, what is my approach that I'm doing here? I need to rethink my approach to this community. And I'm really glad that I've been able to be a part of it so far.
I've always advised new cadets when I was a cadet to take your time. Don't rush into it. It's a commitment, and talk to people, get to know people. I mean, I actually advise people don't join a household or anything for at least a year. Find your own footing before you decide to walk with someone else.
Yeah,
agreed.
Very much
yeah,
agree.
Absolutely. Yeah, for me, it was kind of a weird situation because Bringalod was full of really, really good young non-white scarf fencers at the time, and I was coming up from Bjornsborg, so I was, kind of part of that, and I was getting a lot of attention. And the problem was that most of the Dons in Bringalod were kind of full up. They'd all taken, like their second or third cadets in the last 6 months, and they were kind of full up and kind of discussing what they were going to do. And apparently there was kind of an impromptu meeting of what are we going to do with Etienne, and YOLO looked around and said, well, I'll take him. And he approached me, and he wasn't really on my list. In fact, I'd been told by someone who I had kind of trusted, whatever you do, don't take a scarf from YOLO because he only gives red scarves to the most arrogant people. Which, yeah, which I guess turned out I was arrogant. Who knew? Because that was, but I can't imagine being anyone else's cadet now. That's just how it worked.
See, my story is kind of the same. Back in the 90s, I actually wanted to be Master Donovan's cadet. But at the time, I didn't know you could go up and say, hey, I'd like to be your cadet. And I took a long hiatus, and I came back and got back into fighting, got to where I felt like, okay, I'm at a point where I would like to be a cadet. And I kind of approached Master Orlando. And I was like, what would make, what do I need to do to become a more, have more value for moving into the cadet world? And he says, well, just go ask Elric. And that's kind of how I found my Don. And it's kind of the same deal. I can't imagine anybody else. So,
and it's going to be different for everybody. But the fact is, I had 2 cadets back in 2008, 2009, 2010, and they didn't work out. And Aubrey kept coming up to me for the next, 8, 9 years going, well, you don't have a cadet. You should have a cadet. You have things to pass on. Why don't you have a cadet? And my answer was always, there isn't any. I had a couple people who I thought might have some sort of connection with. And it was cool, but they ended up being cadets to other people. And that was the right choice for them. And that was fine. And Orazio just sort of happened. I knew him from when he was at Shadowlands back in like 2008, 2009. If you really want to be scared, he still actually has a Facebook profile for Orazio DSCC, under his persona name. But when he got shipped out to Alaska in the Army, he lost the password. And Facebook is saying they need to have a legal document proving he's Orazio DSCC, so they'll let him back in, so he can't change anything. It's set there. So the profile picture is him in 2010 when he was in the Cadet Corps at A&M. It's rather, but wearing his Shadowlands tabard. If you want to have fun, go find it. It's delightfully so not what he looks like right now. But he ended up coming, after he got out of the Army, he ended up back here, and it worked. And we started talking. And, like I said, I wasn't planning on it, but he's been absolutely wonderful as my cadet, and I really am proud of him. He doesn't suck completely. Okay, his taste in Dons, I'm not so sure about, but hey, other than that. Hang on.
Goes around winning queens when you're not looking, right?
Well, he decided to do that for God knows whatever reason, but he'll get better eventually. For those of you who are interested, if you click on the link I just put over there in the chat, go scare yourself and look at Orazio at like 18, 19. It's kind of frightening. See, cadet pranks still happen going the other direction as well. I'm sure he's going to be thrilled when he finds out I shared this with everybody. But again, if you have questions, ask us. The only way things are going to actually, we'll get the information passed on is if we know that people want to know about it. And right now, obviously, we do the best we can. Rhiannon, thank you so much for setting up the virtual academy. This has been, all the classes have been fabulous. They've been amazing. But, once we're back to being face-to-face, please, unless the real job of being Kingdom Citadel grabs me, I'm always willing to talk about it. Come and find me. Ivar kind of knows how to tell some stories. You might talk to him. Whoever.
For years, I have been told that it's required to sit in his living room for 100 hours.
What I was told when I was a cadet was one of the requirements to being a Don was 100 hours in either Tyvar or YOLO's living room. And then about 6 months in, I was told that we should also include Robin in that list as well. And that, at the time, that made sense. Nowadays, I think I'm on that list, whether I want to be or not.
These days, you could spend 100 hours on the Moondragon Manor website. It's probably easier than trying to get to my living room.
There you go. But please, folks, ask. We are more than happy to talk, and we want you guys to think this is cool just like the rest of us. And sometimes the only way to do that is to, you find out something cool and you want to share it with your friends. So
one of the things to look at, the banners, the blades, there was a need. A group thought it was cool. They pushed through the naysayers and made it happen. If you have an idea and you think it's cool and you bounce it off a decent group of people, make it happen. Don't worry about the naysayers. There will always be naysayers. There will be people that will say, no, the sun should not come up tomorrow morning. Should never come up again. Who cares what people with that kind of an attitude think? If you've got what you feel is a good and righteous idea, and you've got support for it, don't be afraid to pursue it.
Yep. Agreed. Any other questions? Anybody have anything else?
I should mention that some of the Ethelmar cadets still try to set Diego on fire.
Okay, so one of the things you want to do to Diego, so when he was still my cadet, him and Joaquin at a border march melee event that I was marshal in charge of, thought it would be really great to sneak into my tent while I was asleep and take my pants, all of them, and stick them on the event flagpole. Well, that was a great idea, right up to the point where they then discovered that the policy we were running in Kingdom at the time was if a blade failed inspection, the marshal kept the blade until after the fighting to make sure it didn't accidentally end up on the field. I had no pants, they had no blades. Steal his pants, all of them.
Yeah, hey, Cyrus, another thing you can also do to Diego. I know Ethelmark does death from behind, but a variation on this, that because Ansteorran doesn't do death from behind. But what we got taught to do and not to do to either Henri or Diego is you come up behind them and you take your blade and you put it between their legs and sort of waggle it back and forth, just to let them know you're there. You're not doing death, you're not hitting them, you're not doing anything illegal. But amazing when you get up, when you sort of wiggle it around and you start tapping the bottom of their cup from behind, they tend to jump a lot. Just so you're aware.
Your teammates get a really easy kill out of it.
Yeah, just make sure the guys in front of them know about that you're about to do something. And not that we've ever done this. And by the way, I may have done it to Illidor at least once. But
See, I think the worst thing I've done to him, though, is make him take a protege.
there you go. Oh, and there was a phrase that used to be, those that were around long enough ago, since Nicolo brought up the cards, the Dawn trading cards. There was a statistic on the Dawn trading cards that applies to, I would say, most of the people who are now White Scarves, which was residual cadet-like humor. I'm pretty sure most of the White Scarves suffer from residual cadet-like humor.
When was that event that I came down and taught in Bringolad?
Yep, the Bringolad Fighting is Fighting event.
Yeah, how many years ago was that?
About 4 or 5.
So I made the mistake at that event of realizing it was Halloween on Friday night and borrowed one of Martin Malone's old red scarves and showed up as my younger cadetly self and tried to behave like a cadet for the Friday night at the Entertain the Baroness tournament, which was some of the most fun I've had in years. And then Saturday morning was my body reminding me that I was no longer in my 20s.
Nope. We are not the cadets we were 20 years ago or 15 years ago.
Oh, I do have to pass on one that Jean Robert did. He was my cadet back before he got his scarf in North Shield. And we were going to Middle Kingdom Academy of Defense. And he was driving ahead of me and had a lot of storage space. So I sent my tent with him to set it up for me. And he set up an air mattress for me as well. A whole lot of balloons with just a contour sheet over them. There, you've got your sleeping space.
There you go.
Which at the end, my revenge was having him then proceed to pack it by, he gets to be the one to go ahead and have to pop all of the balloons on Monday morning or Sunday morning.
I do still say one of the best reversed cadet pranks I've ever heard of was Don Simon when Rigo was his student. It didn't happen, but Simon came up with the idea and Rigo found out about the idea. And just the idea that Simon would do this scared Rigo enough to change his behavior for like 2 years. North Shield kept coming down to Gulf Wars and fighting against Ansteorran each year. And 1 year Simon was not going to be able to make it. And like a week and a half ahead, he calls me and says, hey, if I were to show up, I don't think I can, but if it works out, if I were to show up, can I get some crash space with your guys' camp? And I'm like, sure, why wouldn't you want to stay with North Shield? He says, just trust me. Well, what his idea had been was he was going to show up, be in our camp, not let anyone North Shield know he was there, and the next morning show up to the first battle fighting with Ansteorran against North Shield. And when North Shield asked him, why are you fighting with Ansteorran, he would say, well, I came to the event and my cadet was supposed to bring my tent, but Rigo didn't bother to pack it. So I'm camping with these people because they gave me a place to stay. So I'm obligated to fight for them since they, took care of me and my cadet didn't. Apparently, just the idea that Simon thought of doing this made Rigo bring an extra tent with him to every event for the next 2 years. Bravo.
We later got him on the Cadetly side when he was a Don. We had this big event, kind of like To Save a Queen, huge area of grounds. There were 2 healing spots that you could go to. And once it was empty, me and Jose went in, killed the healer. So he had to go all the way across site to the other healing spot to be resurrect, come back. And anybody who came in to be resurrected, we just informed them that Rigo had killed him. And so they were all hitting Rigo afterwards.
Good.
And gunning for him for the rest of the event.
He deserves it. All right, folks. I thank you all for being here and listening to us babble. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Send me a note on Facebook or whatever. It's not like we don't have time right now.
Thank you again.
Thanks for putting it on.
You. Good to see everybody. Everyone be safe.
Thanks for the history, Avery.
My pleasure.
Thank you all.
Later, everyone.